The gun trembled in Thomas Harper's hands, barrel aimed at the man, bleeding into the sand. Marcus Bowen, the same Marcus who dragged him from a burning Humvee 15 years ago now, lay crumpled at his feet, eyes glazing over. "I'm sorry, brother," Thomas whispered, but the words dissolved into the roar of approaching waves. Behind him, Maverick's savage barking tore through the storm. The German shepherd lunged toward Dolores, teeth bared, warning his master of something Thomas had been too blind to see. Blood mixed with seawater, the SOS stones scattered across the beach mocked him now. This rescue mission had become an execution. Thunder cracked overhead. In 6 hours, this island would be underwater. Thomas looked at his hands, at Marcus's still form, at the woman he'd thought he was saving. Everything had been a lie. 18 hours earlier. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching. From now, let's continue with the story. Thomas Harper woke at 5 in the morning to the same nightmare that had haunted him for 15 years. The Humvee exploded again in his mind, metal shrieking, Jenkins screaming his name, blood warm against Thomas's hands as his friend's life drained away in the Afghan dust. He jolted upright in bed, heart hammering, sheets soaked with sweat, the cabin walls pressed in around him. Oregon, he reminded himself, not Kandahar, Oregon. Through the window, dawn painted the forest in soft grays. On the porch, Maverick waited, the German shepherd's amber eyes tracking every movement. Thomas pulled on his clothes and stepped outside. The dog padded over, pressing against his leg, a silent anchor to reality. "Morning, boy," Thomas murmured, running his fingers through Maverick's thick coat. He made coffee with shaking hands, counting the ritual movements to quiet his mind. 1 scoop, 2, 3. The familiar motions kept the memories at bay. On the kitchen counter, a stack of bills waited like enemy combatants. Property tax notice, $4,200 overdue. Final warning from the bank. His Cessna, the only thing keeping him employed, was mortgaged to the hilt. $28,000 still owed. Thomas opened his wallet, $347. The math was brutal and simple. He'd applied for VA benefits twice. Both times denied. Insufficient evidence your condition stems from service-related trauma, the letter said, as if watching your brothers die wasn't evidence enough. At 62, Thomas lived alone because it was easier than explaining the nightmares, the flashbacks, the sudden panic when a car backfired. His ex-wife had tried for 3 years before giving up. "I can't compete with your ghosts," she'd said, and he hadn't blamed her. Only Maverick understood the dog had been rejected from the K-9 program 4 years ago, too aggressive with strangers. They'd said Thomas had seen something different, a creature that wouldn't abandon its post, that chose loyalty over compliance. He'd driven 3 hours to the training facility and brought Maverick home that same day. Now the shepherd was his alarm clock, his therapist, his reason to get out of bed. Thomas checked the Cessna's pre-flight list methodically. Fuel gauge, engine oil, control surfaces. Maverick jumped into the back seat without prompting, settling into his usual spot. The dog knew the routine as well as Thomas did. Fly the coastline, photograph timber parcels, return home, repeat tomorrow. The routine was all that kept Thomas from eating his service pistol. He pulled on his old flight jacket, fingers brushing something in the pocket of folded paper he didn't remember putting there. He started to open it, then stopped. Later, after the flight, the engine coughed to life. Maverick's tail thumped against the seat. "One more day?" Thomas said to no one in particular. "Just one more day." The Cessna climbed through morning fog, following the jagged coastline of the San Juan Islands. Thomas kept one hand steady on the yoke, eyes scanning the endless gray where sea met sky. The radio crackled weather warning storm system moving in fast. Expected landfall by late afternoon. He'd need to finish his route early. Maverick had been calm during takeoff, but now the dog stood rigid in the back seat, ears sharp as radar dishes. A low growl rumbled from his chest. "What is it, boy?" The growl deepened. Maverick's front paws pressed against the window, claws scraping fiberglass. In 4 years of flying together, Thomas had never seen him act this way. Then he saw it, on a narrow strip of beach below. 3 letters spelled out in white stone's SOS. Thomas circled lower. The island was small, maybe 2 miles across, thick with Douglas fir and rocky outcrops, no boats visible. No people, just those 3 letters. Stark against dark said he should fly on, call it in to the Coast Guard. Not his problem. But Maverick was frantic now, barking with an urgency that made Thomas's skin prickle. The dog lunged toward the door, tail rigid, every muscle coiled. Thomas's hand tightened on the yoke. His mind flashed to Afghanistan, a village they'd flown past, just another cluster of mud houses. He'd seen smoke rising, but had orders to continue to base. They'd learned later that 14 civilians had died in that village while he flew overhead. 14 people, including children, who might have lived if someone had stopped. "I can't leave someone stranded," he muttered. The words felt like confession, like penance. The beach was barely long enough, but Thomas had landed in worse. He brought the Cessna down hard, tires bouncing on wet sand, spray kicking up around them. The engine shuddered as he cut power. Silence rushed in, broken only by waves and Maverick's anxious panting. Thomas grabbed his pack and stepped onto the beach. The SOS stones were fresh, not weathered, not scattered by tide. Someone had placed them recently, but the beach was empty. No footprints led away from the message except a confusing tangle of tracks that disappeared into the tree line. "Hello." His voice sounded small against the ocean's roar. "Anyone here?" "Nothing." Maverick jumped down, immediately nosing along the sand. The dog's behavior changed, head low, tail down, that same focused intensity Thomas had seen in working canines. Maverick was tracking something. Thomas followed the dog to a cluster of rocks above the tide line. Behind them, half buried in sand, lay a small waterproof notebook. He opened it carefully. The pages were damp, ink smeared but readable. The handwriting was rushed, desperate. "If anyone finds this, call police. Marcus isn't who I thought. He killed Jake. I'm next. There's proof in the North Cave. Please help Dolores Whitman." Thomas's hands went cold. He looked around the empty beach with new eyes. This wasn't a simple rescue. Someone was in danger. Someone might already be dead. Maverick barked once, sharp and insistent, then bolted toward the forest. Thomas checked his pistol 6 rounds and followed his dog into the trees, leaving the Cessna alone on the beach behind them. The forest closed around them like a fist. Douglas firs rose into fog, their branches dripping with moisture. Thomas moved carefully, boots silent on the carpet of pine needles. Maverick ranged ahead, nose to the ground, tracking something Thomas couldn't see. The crash of a branch made Thomas freeze. His heart kicked into overdrive. Suddenly, he wasn't in Washington anymore. He was back in the Hindu Kush, patrol moving through enemy territory, every shadow a threat. His breathing went shallow. Sweat broke across his forehead despite the cool air. Oregon, he whispered to himself. You're in Oregon, not Afghanistan. But his hands shook anyway. The forest sounds amplified wind through branches became rotor blades. A bird's cry transformed into distant screaming. Jenkins' face flashed before him, blood bubbling from his throat. Tom, don't let me die alone. Maverick circled back and pressed against Thomas's leg. Warm and solid, the contact pulled him back to the present. Thomas knelt, burying his face in the dog's fur, forcing his breathing to slow, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Count to 4. Again. The dog waited patiently until Thomas's hands stopped trembling. I'm okay, Thomas lied. Let's keep moving. They found the cave entrance 20 minutes later. A dark mouth in the rocky hillside. Scenes of recent habitation littered the area, a makeshift fire ring, empty food wrappers, a tarp stretched between trees, and blood. Dark stains scattered across the stone. Hello, Thomas called. I'm here to help. I found the message. A groan answered from inside the cave. Thomas drew his pistol and approached slowly. In the dim light, he could make out a figure slumped against the back wall. A man, maybe 55, face pale and drawn. His left leg was wrapped in crude bandages, dark with dried blood. Thank God, the man rasped. I thought no one would come. Thomas holstered his weapon and knelt beside him. What happened here? Camping trip. There were 3 of us, me, my girlfriend Dolores, and our friend Jake. The storm hit 3 days ago. Our boat capsized getting to shore. Jake went to find help and never came back. I hurt my leg searching for him. The man's voice cracked. Dolores went looking for food this morning. She should have been back by now. It sounded plausible, but Maverick hadn't moved from the cave entrance. The dog stood rigid, a low growl vibrating in his chest. His hackles were raised, ears pinned back. Thomas glanced at his dog, then back at the injured man. Maverick had never been wrong about people. Never. I'm Marcus. By the way, Marcus Bowen. The man extended his hand. The name hit Thomas like a rifle shot. He stared at the man's face, really looked at him, older now, weathered by time, but the features were unmistakable. The small mole on his left neck, the crooked nose from a bar fight in Kabul. Marcus Bowen from Kandahar. Thomas's voice came out strangled. Marcus's eyes widened in recognition. Harper, Tom. Harper, is that really you? 15 years collapsed in an instant. Marcus Bowen, who'd dragged him from the burning Humvee, who'd carried him 2 miles under fire, who'd saved his life when everyone else assumed he was dead. I can't believe it, Marcus said, trying to smile through obvious pain. Of all the people to find me. Thomas's mind spun. This was his brother in arms, the man who'd given him a second chance at life. But the notebook had mentioned Marcus by name, accused him of murder, and Maverick was still growling, teeth bared, refusing to come closer. "Your leg," Thomas said carefully. "How did that happen?" "Fell down a slope looking for Jake. Stupid accident." But the wound was too clean, too straight, not a fall, a cut, and there near the dying fire, a pair of rubber gloves. Why would a camper need rubber gloves? "Where exactly did Dolores go?" Thomas asked. "East, toward the water. Said she saw berry bushes." Maverick's ears swiveled. The dog turned and stared intensely to the south opposite direction from where Marcus claimed Dolores had gone. Marcus watched them both, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "You'll help me look for her, won't you, for old time's sake?" Thomas stood slowly. "Yeah, of course. Just let me check my supplies first." He backed out of the cave, never taking his eyes off Marcus. The moment he was outside, he pulled the folded paper from his jacket pocket, the one he'd found earlier. His hands shook as he read, "Harper, fly to coordinates 8.5 to Jean, 123 Puja, Dagu to the day. Someone owes you." These were the exact coordinates of this island. Someone had wanted him here, someone who knew his name, someone who signed with just an initial. Thomas looked back toward the cave entrance. Marcus was watching him through the shadows, and for just a moment, Thomas saw something cold flicker across his old friend's face. Maverick barked once, sharp and urgent, then took off running south through the trees. Thomas followed, leaving Marcus Bowen alone in the cave. Maverick moved through the forest like a missile, locked on target. Thomas struggled to keep up, branches whipping at his face, breath burning in his lungs. The dog's tail was rigid, ears forward, the hunting posture of a working K. They emerged into a small clearing. A tarp had been stretched between the trees, creating a makeshift shelter. Beneath it, Thomas found canvas bags stacked in neat rows. His stomach dropped as he unzipped the first one. White powder in sealed plastic bags. Dozens of them. At least 20 kilograms. "Jesus Christ," Thomas whispered. This wasn't a camping trip. This was a drug operation. The island was being used as a transfer point remote. Inaccessible. Perfect for moving product without detection. He searched the rest of the shelter. A satellite radio. Expensive and illegal on civilian frequencies. A Glock 19 with 2 full magazines. A notebook filled with codes and coordinates: Vancouver, Seattle, Portland. Dates and dollar amounts that made Thomas's head spin. Marcus Bowen wasn't a stranded camper. He was running a smuggling operation. And Dolores Whitman knew about it. Thomas's military training kicked in. He photographed everything with his phone, careful not to disturb the scene. Evidence. The police would need evidence. Maverick barked from the edge of the clearing. The dog had found a trail leading south, deeper into the island. Thomas followed, pistol drawn now, every sense heightened. The trail led to marshland. Water seeped through his boots as he navigated between pools of stagnant water. Insects buzzed in clouds. And then, faint but unmistakable, a human voice. "Help! Please, someone help me!" Thomas ran toward the sound. Maverick reached it first, pawing at a rusted metal door set into a concrete foundation. World War II. Vintage, an old military observation post, half buried in mud and overgrown with moss. A chain wrapped around the door handle, secured with a padlock. The voice came from inside. "I hear you?" Thomas shouted, "Stand back from the door!" He found a rock and hammered at the padlock. 5 strikes, 10. Finally the hasp broke free. He yanked the chain off and pulled the door open. A woman stumbled out into the light, blonde, late 30s, clothes torn and filthy. Her wrists were raw from rope burns. She collapsed against Thomas, sobbing. Thank God you found me. Dolores Whitman." She nodded frantically. "He was going to kill me, Marcus. He's insane. He killed Jake. I saw it. He pushed him off the cliff, and I saw everything." Her story poured out between sobs. She and Marcus had been dating for 2 years. He'd brought her to the island to propose, or so she thought. But she'd found the drugs hidden in his boat. When she confronted him, he'd turned violent. Jake wasn't a friend, he was FBI, and Marcus had discovered his cover. Marcus had murdered him 3 days ago and thrown his body into the ocean. "He locked me in there to die," Dolores said. "Said he'd wait for the storm, then make it look like I drowned." Thomas helped her to her feet. She was dehydrated, exhausted, but alive. "You're safe now. I have a plane. We'll get you out of here." "What about Marcus? He's in a cave about half a mile north. Says his leg is injured." Dolores laughed bitterly. "He did that to himself, to look like a victim. That's how his mind works, always 3 steps ahead." Thomas studied her face. The fear seemed genuine. The trauma was real, but something nagged at him. Maverick stood several feet of her, refusing to approach Dolores. The dog's posture was stiff, uncertain. "Easy, boy," Thomas said. "She's okay." But Maverick didn't relax. If anything, the dog's wariness increased. "I'm sorry," Dolores said, noticing the dog's reaction. "Animals can sense fear. I'm terrified right now." That made sense. Thomas pushed his doubt aside. The woman had been locked in a concrete tomb for days. Of course she was traumatized. "We need to move fast," he said. "There's a storm coming. Can you walk?" "I think so." "Good. The plane is on the North Beach. We'll need to circle around to avoid Marcus." Dolores grabbed his arm. "Wait, Jake might still be alive. Marcus said he killed him, but what if he was just injured? What if he's out there somewhere?" Thomas hesitated. The humane thing would be to search. But the storm was closing in. They had maybe 4 hours before the island became a death trap. Where did Marcus attack him? East side of the island, there's a cliff overlooking the water. Thomas made a decision he'd regret. "Okay, you head toward the beach. Stay hidden. I'll do a quick search for Jake, then meet you at the plane. If I'm not there in 90 minutes, take off without me, call the Coast Guard. I can't fly a plane. Then wait in the cockpit. Lock the doors. Don't let Marcus anywhere near you." Dolores nodded, wiping tears from her face. "Thank you. You saved my life." She headed north through the trees. Thomas watched her go, then turned east. Maverick stayed glued to his side, but kept looking back in the direction Dolores had gone. "I know, boy," Thomas muttered. "Something's off, but we can't leave Jake if there's a chance." They moved quickly through underbrush. The wind was picking up, bringing the smell of rain. Thunder rumbled in the distance. 20 minutes of searching brought them to the eastern cliff. Thomas peered over the edge, a 60-foot drop to jagged rocks and churning surf. No body visible, but the tide could have taken it. He was about to give up when Maverick started digging frantically at a pile of brush. Thomas helped clear it away. Underneath was a backpack. FBI identification, inside Special Agent Jacob Anderson, and a satellite phone, still charged. Thomas's hands shook as he powered it on. The call history showed multiple attempts to reach a Seattle number, all blocked by lack of signal. The last attempted call was 3 days ago. Then he saw the text drafts. Unsent messages typed but never transmitted. Subjects: Marcus Bowen and Dolores Whitman. Confirmed at transfer site. Moving to apprehend under attack. Send backup to coordinates. The phone slipped from Thomas's fingers. Dolores Whitman, subject, not victim. She was Marcus's partner. She'd been part of this from the beginning. And Thomas had just sent her straight to his airplane. He ran. Thomas crashed through the forest, branches tearing at his clothes, lungs screaming for air. Maverick ran ahead, sensing his master's panic. The beach wasn't far, maybe half a mile, but every second counted. His mind raced through the implications. Dolores was Marcus's accomplice, not his victim. The entire rescue scenario had been staged. But why? What did they want from him? The answer hit him like a gut punch's plane. They needed a way off the island. The Coast Guard would be watching the waters, but a small aircraft could slip away unnoticed. And once they had the Cessna, they'd have no use for witnesses. Thomas burst from the tree line onto the beach. The sight that greeted him stopped him cold. His airplane sat where he'd left it, but something was wrong. Liquid pooled beneath the fuselage, spreading dark across the sand. The sharp smell of aviation fuel cut through the salt air. He ran to the plane. The fuel line had been cut clean through. Gallons of gasoline had drained into the sand, leaving the tanks nearly empty. The radio had been smashed, wires that hanging like severed arteries. Someone had slashed the tires, too. The Cessna sat listing to one side, useless. Looking for this, Thomas spun around. Dolores stood at the edge of the forest, no longer trembling or afraid. She held his sat phone in one hand, in the other, the Glock from the drug cache. "You sabotaged my plane," Thomas said, keeping his voice steady. "Marcus did, actually. While you were playing hero in the woods," she smiled without warmth. "He's quite resourceful when he's not pretending to be injured." "So, none of it was real? The kidnapping, the fear?" "Oh, the notebook was real enough. Insurance, in case things went sideways. Make it look like I was the victim. Marcus, the villain. Leave enough evidence to muddy the waters." She stepped closer, gun steady. "But you complicated things. We were supposed to have another week before the next supply run. Then you showed up." Thomas's hand drifted toward his pistol. "Don't," Dolores warned. "I'm actually a decent shot. Marcus taught me." "What do you want? Originally to kill you and sink your plane offshore, make it look like you crashed in the storm." She tilted her head, studying him. "But Marcus recognized you, said you two served together. Sure, said you were someone he owed." "He owes me nothing." "That's not how he sees it. He's having second thoughts about the whole murder his savior thing." Dolores's voice dripped sarcasm. "He actually wants to let you live. Can you believe it? After everything we've built, he wants to spare you because of some bonding moment in Afghanistan." Thunder cracked overhead, the first raindrops began to fall. "So what happens now?" Thomas asked. "Now we wait for our ride. We called our people before you landed. They're sending a boat tonight. We'll be gone by morning, and you'll be dead long before anyone finds you. The Coast Guard will investigate. They'll find a crashed plane and a body. Tragic accident and bad weather happens all the time." She gestured with the gun. "Hands behind your head, on your knees." Thomas didn't move. "Marcus won't let you do this. Marcus will do what I tell him. He always does." Something vicious flickered in her eyes. "You think he's the mastermind? He's a washed-up soldier with PTSD and no prospects. I built this operation. I found the suppliers, set up the routes, laundered the money. Marcus just provides muscle and a convenient cover story, the damaged veteran everyone underestimates." A branch snapped in the forest. Marcus emerged from the trees, walking without any trace of injury. He took in the scene, Thomas on his feet, Dolores holding the gun, Maverick growling low in his throat. "Dolores." "Put it down," Marcus said quietly. "We discussed this. He's a liability. He saved my life in Kandahar. I'm not killing him." "Then you're a fool." Dolores swung the gun toward Marcus. "I should have known you'd go soft. You always were too sentimental." Marcus raised his hand slowly. "Baby, think about this. Kill him, and we're murderers. Let him go. We disappear with the money. We can still walk away clean." "There is no clean. Not anymore. Jake was FBI. You think they'll stop looking?" Her voice rose. "We've finished this now, or we spend the rest of our lives running." Thomas saw his chance, while Dolores focused on Marcus. He dropped his hand toward his holster, but Maverick moved faster. The dog launched himself at Dolores with a snarl. 70 pounds of muscle and fury, she screamed and fired. The shot went wild as Maverick's jaws clamped onto her wrist. The Glock tumbled into the sand. Thomas drew his weapon. "Nobody move!" Marcus stood frozen, hands still raised. Dolores clutched her bleeding wrist, tears streaming down her face. Maverick stood between them and Thomas, hackles raised, ready to attack again. "It's over," Thomas said. "Both of you on the ground, face down here." That's when he heard it, the distinctive sound of a rifle being chambered behind him. "Actually," a new voice said, "nobody's going anywhere." Thomas turned slowly. A man stood at the forest edge, AR beam pointed at Thomas's chest. He wore body armor and tactical gear. An FBI badge hung from his neck. Special Agent Jacob Anderson, very much alive. "Lower your weapon, Harper Jake," Jake said. "Nice and easy." Thomas's world tilted. "You're supposed to be dead." "Obviously not. Now drop the gun before this gets messy." Thomas let his pistol fall to the sand. His mind couldn't process what he was seeing. Jake was alive. Jake was FBI. Jake had sent him the note with the coordinates. "You set me up," Thomas said. "You brought me here deliberately." "I needed a civilian witness, someone with no connection to the operation who could testify they found evidence independently." Jake kept the rifle trained on Thomas. "Unfortunately, you became more than a witness. You became a participant. I was trying to help." "I know. That's the problem." Said Jake's expression was almost apologetic. "I've been undercover for 8 months. I couldn't arrest them until they led me to their supplier. You showing up forced my hand too early. Now I don't have enough evidence to make the charges stick." Marcus laughed bitterly. "So what's your play? Agent Anderson, kill us all. Make it look like we shot each other." "I'm considering it." The rain fell harder now, turning the beach into mud. Thomas looked at the three of them, Marcus, Dolores, Jake, and realized he'd walked into something far more complicated than a simple rescue. "There's another option," Dolores said, cradling her bleeding wrist. She'd gone pale, but her voice stayed steady. "We all walk away. You got your evidence, Agent? The drugs, the notebook, the photos on Harper's phone. That's enough to shut down the route even if we disappear." "Not even close," Jake said. "I need bodies or testimony, preferably both." Thunder boomed, lightning split the sky, and in that flash of light, Thomas saw movement in the trees behind Jake, a shadow, low and fast. Maverick. The dog had circled around while they were talking. Now he charged from Jake's blind spot, hitting the agent from behind. Jake went down hard, rifle flying from his hands. He rolled, reaching for his sidearm. But Maverick was relentless, teeth snapping, snarling, giving Thomas precious seconds. Thomas lunged for Jake's rifle. His hands closed around the barrel just as Dolores grabbed her fallen Glock. Marcus was already moving, sprinting for the forest. Everything happened at once, Dolores swinging her weapon toward Thomas, Jake shouting orders. Maverick's jaws locked on the agent's arm, Marcus disappearing into the trees, and then Dolores pulled the trigger. The gunshot echoed across the beach. Thomas felt the bullet pass inches from his head, so close he heard it cut the air. He dove left, bringing the rifle up as he rolled. Another shot, this one, sparked off the Cessna's propeller. Dolores was advancing, firing methodically. The woman who'd pretended to be a terrified victim now moved with cold precision. Thomas squeezed off a burst from the AR-15, forcing her to duck behind a driftwood log. Jake wrestled with Maverick, trying to throw the dog off. "Harper, stand down. This is a federal operation." "Then stop pointing guns at me," Thomas shouted back. Marcus emerged from the forest behind Dolores, carrying the machete from his cave. "Get to the boat," he yelled to her. "I'll handle this." "There is no boat," Jake grunted, finally kicking Maverick away. The dog yelped, but recovered quickly, circling for another attack. "I called it off when Harper arrived. You're trapped." Dolores's face went white. "You're lying." "Check your radio. Go ahead." She pulled the satellite radio from her jacket with her uninjured hand, keeping the gun trained on Thomas. Her fingers fumbled with the controls. Static hissed. She cycled through frequencies. Nothing but dead air. "No, no, no." Panic crept into her voice. Marcus grabbed her shoulder. "It doesn't matter. We still have time before the storm hits. We'll take their boat." "What boat?" Thomas said. "I flew here. Then we swim if we have to." Marcus's desperation was showing now. The cool criminal facade was cracking. "Dolores, come on. We can still make this work." "How?" She whirled on him, gun shaking. "We're stuck on an island with an FBI agent and a witness. The drugs are here. Our supplier thinks we're dead. And the Coast Guard is probably already on their way. How do we make this work?" "We bargain," Marcus turned to Jake. "You want your big arrest? Your career-making case? We'll give you names, locations, bank accounts, everything in exchange for immunity." Jake had his sidearm out now, trained on Marcus. Blood seeped through his sleeve where Maverick had bitten him. "No deals. You killed a federal informant. There's no immunity for that. What informant? Dolores demanded. The boat captain who brought your last shipment, Timothy Crawford. He was cooperating with us. You found out and slit his throat. Marcus shook his head violently. That wasn't us. That was... He stopped abruptly. That was who? Jake pressed. Your supplier. Your distributor. Give me a name. Bowen. Thomas saw the calculation happening behind Marcus's eyes. The man was weighing options, measuring angles, looking for any path to survival. It was the same look he'd had in Afghanistan when their convoy was ambushed, the cold mathematics of staying alive. Rain hammered down now, turning the beach into a blur of gray. Waves crashed higher, reaching toward the disabled plane. The storm was arriving early. Dolores made her choice. She swung her gun away from Thomas and pointed it at Jake. Put your weapon down, Agent. Do it now, or I'll kill you. You shoot a federal officer, you'll die in prison, Jake said calmly. I'm already going to die in prison, at least this way. I take you with me. Her finger tightened on the trigger. Marcus, get his gun. Marcus didn't move. He stood frozen between his partner and the FBI agent, machete hanging loose in his hand. Marcus? Dolores snapped. Now, no, The word came out quiet, but it hit like a thunderclap. Dolores's face twisted with betrayal. What did you say? I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not killing cops. I'm not killing Harper. I'm done. Marcus dropped the machete. Jake's right. There's no way out. It's over. You coward! Dolores's voice dripped venom. After everything I did for you, I pulled you out of that VA parking lot when you were living in your car. I gave you purpose, money, a future, and you're just going to surrender. I surrendered the day I met you, Marcus said quietly. I just didn't realize it until now. Thomas saw it happening before anyone else did, saw the shift in Dolores's eyes, the way her weight transferred forward. She was going to shoot Marcus, then Jake, then probably him. She decided that if she couldn't escape, no one would survive to testify. He shouted a warning, but his voice was lost in the wind. Dolores pulled the trigger. Marcus jerked backward as the bullet caught him in the chest. He stumbled, fell to his knees in the surf. Blood bloomed across his shirt, mixing with rain and seawater. Jake fired a split second later. His shot hit Dolores in the shoulder, spinning her around. She dropped the Glock and collapsed onto the sand, screaming. Thomas ran to Marcus. The man who'd saved his life in Kandahar was dying on a beach in Washington. 15 years and 1,000 bad decisions later. Blood bubbled at Marcus's lips as he tried to speak. Tom. Marcus's hand grabbed Thomas's jacket. I'm sorry for all of it. I should have stayed the person you knew. Don't talk. Save your strength. But Thomas could see the wound. Center mass. No exit. Marcus would be dead in minutes. Tell my sister. Marcus coughed, spraying blood. Tell her I tried. At the end, tell her I tried to do the right thing. Jake stood over them, weapon still drawn, radio in his other hand, calling for emergency extraction. Dolores writhed on the ground nearby, clutching her shoulder. Maverick limped over to Thomas, favoring his right foreleg. You have a sister, Thomas asked Marcus. Phoenix, Sarah Bowen. She hasn't spoken to me in 6 years. Tell her. Marcus's grip loosened. His eyes lost focus. Tell her Afghanistan didn't kill me. Tell her I killed myself. The light went out of Marcus Bowen's eyes. The man who'd dragged Thomas from a burning vehicle, who'd carried him 2 miles under fire, who'd given him a second chance at life, was gone. His body went slack, head lolling to the sea. Thomas closed Marcus's eyes with shaking hands. The rain washed the blood from his fingers, but couldn't cleanse the weight of what he'd witnessed. Jake approached, keeping his weapon ready. "Harper, I need you to step away from the body. He saved my life once." Thomas said hollowly, "I couldn't save his. He made his choices. So did she." Jake glanced at Dolores, who'd gone silent, staring at Marcus's corpse with an expression Thomas couldn't read. "Coast Guard will be here in 20 minutes. You'll need to give a statement." Thomas stood slowly. His legs felt like water. "You used me. You deliberately put me in danger to build your case. I needed an independent witness, someone who couldn't be accused of working with me." Jake's face was hard. "I'm sorry you got caught in the crossfire, but this operation took down a major trafficking route. Dozens of lives will be saved because of what happened here today. And the ones lost." Thomas looked at Marcus's body. "Do those count for anything?" Jake didn't answer. Thunder cracked overhead. Lightning illuminated the scene in stark white: a dead smuggler, a wounded accomplice, a ruined airplane, and 2 men standing in the rain wondering how they'd gotten here. Maverick whined softly. Thomas looked down and saw blood matting the dog's fur along his right side, the wound from Marcus's machete. In the chaos, he'd forgotten. "Easy, boy. Let me see." The cut was deep, but not fatal. Thomas used his shirt to apply pressure, but Maverick needed real medical attention soon. The dog's breathing was labored, eyes dimming with pain. "Hang on," Thomas whispered. "Just hang on a little longer." But even as he said it, Dolores began to laugh, a broken, hysterical sound that cut through the storm. "You still don't get it," she gasped between laughs. "None of you understand what you've done." Jake moved closer. "What are you talking about?" She rolled onto her back, staring up at the rain. "Marcus thought he was protecting me, thought he was saving us both by giving up." More laughter. "He didn't know. I didn't tell him." "Tell him what?" Dolores's hand drifted to her stomach, through her torn shirt. Thomas could see the gentle swell of early pregnancy. "I'm carrying his child, kid," she said. 5 months, and you just made his baby an orphan." The words hung in the rain-soaked air like an accusation. Thomas stared at Dolores's stomach, at the curve, barely visible beneath her muddy clothes. 5 months. Marcus had died not knowing he was going to be a father. Jake's weapon lowered slightly. For the first time since appearing on the beach, the agent looked uncertain. "You're lying. Check my medical records. They're in my bag at the camp." Dolores's voice had gone flat, shock setting in alongside her shoulder wound. Marcus wanted to do one last big score before the baby came, enough money to disappear somewhere safe, start over clean. She laughed bitterly. He actually believed we could just walk away from this life, like it was that simple. Thomas felt sick. He knelt beside Marcus's body again, seeing the man differently now, not just a criminal, not just a fallen soldier, a father who'd never meet his child. "Did he know?" Thomas asked. "I was going to tell him after this run. Wanted to surprise him with the ultrasound pictures." Dolores turned her head toward Marcus's corpse, tears mixing with the rain. "Guess the surprise is on me." Jake spoke into his radio. requesting medical evacuation for a pregnant prisoner. His voice was mechanical, professional, but Thomas caught the tremor underneath. The agent had just killed a man who was trying to save his unborn child's mother. The storm intensified. Pitts now reached the Cessna's wheels, pulling at the sand beneath it. They needed to move to higher ground, but Dolores couldn't walk with her shoulder wound, and Maverick was weakening fast. Blood continued to seep through Thomas's makeshift bandage on the dog's side. "We need to get to the cave," Thomas said. "The beach will be underwater soon." Jake nodded. "Can you carry the dog?" Thomas lifted Maverick carefully. The shepherd whimpered, but didn't resist. He was growing heavier, or Thomas was growing weaker. He couldn't tell which anymore. Every step toward the forest felt like walking through concrete. Jake helped Dolores to her feet. She swayed, face gray with pain and blood loss. "What happens to my baby after they arrest me?" "Foster care until trial," Jake said. "If you're convicted, when I'm convicted, we both know how this ends." Dolores stumbled, and Jake caught her. "My mother's in Phoenix. Stage 4 cancer. She's the only family I have. She'd take the baby, but she's dying too. So my child gets orphaned twice, once when I go to prison, again when she dies." They reached the cave as the storm reached full fury. Wind howled through the trees, bending them nearly horizontal. Inside the cave, Thomas laid Maverick on the tarp Marcus had been using as a bed. The dog's breathing was shallow, rapid. His eyes found Thomas's face and held there trusting, forgiving. Even now, "Don't you dare," Thomas whispered, stroking Maverick's head. "Don't you dare give up on me." But he could see death approaching in the dog's glazed stare. Maverick had lost too much blood. Without immediate veterinary care, he wouldn't survive the night, and the Coast Guard wouldn't arrive for at least another hour. Jake checked Dolores's wound, using supplies from his tactical pack. "Bullet went through clean. You'll live." "Lucky me." Thomas watched them in the firelight from the cave's small ring of stones, agent and criminal, tending each other's wounds while a dead man cooled on the beach below and a dying dog struggled for breath. The absurdity of it felt overwhelming. "Why did you really bring me here?" Thomas asked Jake. "The real reason." Jake was quiet for a long time. "Your fellows said you had a history with Bowen. I thought if things went south, maybe that connection could be useful. Maybe he'd hesitate before killing someone who'd served with him." He met Thomas's eyes. "I was right. He did hesitate. It just didn't save him. So you used our friendship as a weapon." "I used everything I could to close this case. That's my job. And the people who get hurt along the way, the collateral damage." Thomas gestured at Maverick, at Dolores, at the storm raging outside. "Does any of this feel like justice to you?" Jake's jaw tightened. "Justice isn't always clean, Harper. Sometimes it's choosing between bad options and worse ones. Marcus and Dolores poisoned hundreds of people with their product. Heroin doesn't care about your reasons for dealing it. It just kills. So does a bullet." "Yeah, well, I didn't shoot first." Dolores spoke up from her corner of the cave. "For what it's worth, Agent Anderson's right. We knew what we were doing. Marcus liked to pretend we were Robin Hood types taken from rich addicts, redistributing wealth, but that was just a story he told himself to sleep at night." She winced as she shifted position. "The truth is simpler. We were broke, desperate. and willing to hurt people for money, but that's all. What about the baby, sir? Thomas asked. You weren't thinking about hurting that child. I was thinking I could give my kid what I never had: financial security, a trust fund, private schools, a future. She laughed harshly. Turns out I'm giving them exactly what I had. No parents and a legacy of bad choices. Maverick whimpered. Thomas returned to the dog's side, feeling helpless. The shepherd's heartbeat was thready under his palm. Blood had soaked through the bandages, despite the pressure. Come on, boy, Thomas murmured. You held on this long. Don't quit now. But Maverick's eyes were closing. His breathing grew more labored. Each breath seemed like it might be the last. Thomas had seen this before, in Kandahar, watching Jenkins die, while waiting for medevac that arrived too late. The same terrible helplessness, the same desperate bargaining with a universe that didn't negotiate. Not Jenkins, not Maverick, please, not him too. Harper, Jake's voice was gentle. The dog's suffering, we could end it humanely. No. The word came out sharp as broken glass. He's not dead yet. He gets every second he's owed. Minutes crawled past. The storm battered the island, waves crashing so loud they drowned out thought. Thomas held Maverick and counted breaths, measuring the dog's life in heartbeats. Then Jake's radio crackled. Agent Anderson, this is Coast Guard Rescue. We're 5 minutes out. Be ready for extraction. Copy that, Jake responded. He looked at Dolores. Can you walk? Do I have a choice? They helped her to her feet. Thomas lifted Maverick again, cradling the dog like a child. The shepherd's head lolled against Thomas's chest, barely conscious. Outside, the storm had reached biblical proportions. Rain fell in solid sheets. Lightning turned night into day every few seconds. They fought their way down to the beach, where the Coast Guard helicopter was attempting to land despite the wind. The pilot's voice came through Jake's radio. Too dangerous to land. We'll drop a basket. A rescue basket lowered through the chaos. Jake guided Dolores into it first, strapping her in despite her protests about the baby. The basket rose, spinning wildly in the wind before disappearing into the helicopter's belly. It descended again. Your turn, Jake told Thomas. Thomas looked at Maverick in his arms, then at Marcus's body being pummeled by woes further down the beach. The storm would take the corpse soon, drag it out to sea unless they recovered it now. We can't leave him, Thomas said. Marcus, we can't leave him like that. Harper, we don't have time. He saved my life, Thomas's voice broke. In Kandahar, when everyone else left me for dead, he came back. I won't leave him to drown alone. Jake cursed, but he helped. Together, they dragged Marcus's body to the basket. It took both trips, first the corpse, then Thomas with Maverick. By the time Thomas was winched up into the helicopter, he was beyond exhaustion. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. His clothes were soaked through with rain, blood, and seawater. A Coast Guard medic immediately began working on Maverick. He's lost a lot of blood. We'll do what we can, but he needs a vet hospital to... Just keep him alive, Thomas begged. Please. Jake came up last. As the helicopter banked away from the island, Thomas looked out at the storm-ravaged beach. His ruined airplane was already half submerged. By morning, it would be completely gone. $28,000 of debt, washed away by the tide. Everything he owned, destroyed in a single day. Dolores sat across from him, hands cuffed, face pale. She was staring at Marcus's body bag with an expression Thomas couldn't decipher. Grief, regret, relief, maybe all three. He really didn't know about the baby, Thomas asked. She shook her head. I was scared that he'd make stupid decisions if he knew, like trying to go legitimate or taking desperate chances. Her voice went hollow. Turns out he made stupid decisions anyway. The medic working on Maverick looked up. Sir, his heart rate is dropping. We're losing him. Thomas moved to the dog's side, ignoring the medic's protests. He put his face close to Maverick's, felt the shepherd's labored breath against his cheek. Listen to me, Thomas whispered. You don't get to die here, not after everything You hear me? You live, you fight. That's an order. Maverick's eyes fluttered open briefly. The dog's tail moved barely a twitch, but movement nonetheless. That's it. That's my boy. Stay with me. The helicopter raced through the storm toward the mainland, carrying the living, the dying, and the dead. Below them, the island disappeared into darkness, keeping its secrets for another day. The veterinary hospital in Port Townsend worked through the night to save Maverick. Thomas sat in the waiting room, still wearing his salt-stained clothes, watching the clock tick through hours that felt like years. Jake had left to process Dolores and file his reports. Marcus's body had gone to the county morgue. Thomas was alone with fluorescent lights and year-old magazines and the constant fear that a doctor would emerge with bad news. At 3 a.m, the surgeon finally appeared, a woman in her 50s, exhausted but smiling faintly. He's stable, she said. We gave him 2 units of blood, repaired the lacerations. He'll need weeks to recover, but he's going to make it. Thomas couldn't speak. He nodded, tears streaming down his face in the empty waiting room. You can see him in a few hours. Go home, get some rest. He'll be here when you get back. But Thomas had no home to return to. His cabin was 3 hours north, and he had no vehicle. His plane was at the bottom of the ocean by now. His phone was waterlogged and dead. He was stranded, broke, and utterly spent. He slept in the waiting room chair until dawn. When they finally let him see Maverick, the dog was groggy with anesthesia but alive. His tail thumped weakly when Thomas entered the recovery room. Hey, boy, Thomas whispered, kneeling beside the kennel. You scared me there. Maverick licked his hand. The simple gesture broke something open in Thomas's chest. He pressed his head against the kennel door and sobbed for Maverick, for Marcus, for the baby that would grow up without a father, for all the ways the day had broken everyone it touched. A nurse offered him coffee and a phone to call someone. Thomas stared at it, realizing he had no one to call. His ex-wife had remarried. His parents were dead. His army buddies had scattered across the country, and he'd lost touch with most of them years ago. He called Jake instead. The agent answered on the first ring. Harper, how's the dog? Alive, barely. Thomas's voice was raw. I need a ride home, and I need to know what happens next. Come to the federal building downtown. We'll talk. The FBI office smelled like burnt coffee and bureaucracy. Jake looked like he hadn't slept either. His arm was bandaged where Maverick had bitten him, and he moved stiffly, favoring his left side. Dolores is being held without bail, Jake said, pouring them both coffee. She's cooperating, giving us names, accounts, the whole network. In exchange, the prosecutor might reduce her sentence to 20 years instead of life. And the baby. She's petitioning the court to allow her mother to take custody. Given the circumstances, the mother's terminal illness. The child's need for family, they might approve it. Jake sat down heavily. Her mother has maybe 6 months. After that, the state will place the child in foster care. Thomas thought about that baby growing up like Dolores had no parents, no anchor, drifting through a system that didn't care. He thought about Marcus, who'd saved Thomas's life and then thrown away his own, about the cycle of damage that war inflicted, radiating outward for generations. "What about me?" Thomas asked. "Am I being charged? With what? You were a good Samaritan who got caught in a bad situation?" Jake paused. "That said, you'll need to testify when this goes to trial. Could be a year from now, maybe longer. You'll need to stay local, stay available." "I don't have local anymore. My plane's gone. I'm broke. I can barely afford to feed Maverick, much less pay for his surgery." Jake slid a folder across the desk. "Federal Witness Protection Fund. We can cover your immediate expenses, housing, medical bills for the dog, living cost. It's not much, but it'll keep you afloat while you figure things out." Thomas stared at the paperwork. It felt like charity, like being reduced to a dependent. But pride was a luxury he couldn't afford. He signed. The weeks that followed blurred together. Thomas moved into a cheap motel near the vet hospital, visiting Maverick twice a day. The dog recovered slowly, regaining strength day by day. By the second week, Maverick could stand. By the third, he was walking short distances. By the fourth, he greeted Thomas with his old enthusiasm, tail wagging so hard his whole body shook. "You're going home soon," the vet said. "Another few days." Home. The word felt strange. Thomas's cabin had been foreclosed while he was in Port Townsend. The bank had taken everything: furniture, clothes, the few photographs he'd kept from his marriage. His entire life fit in a duffel bag now. Jake helped him find a small apartment on the outskirts of town. 1 bedroom, mostly furnished, month-to-month lease. It overlooked a park where Thomas could walk Maverick once the dog was fully healed. On a gray morning in early autumn, Thomas brought Maverick home from the hospital. The dog explored the apartment carefully, sniffing every corner. Before settling on a blanket Thomas had set up near the window, they sat together watching rain streak the glass. Thomas's phone rang, a number he didn't recognize. "This is Thomas Harper. Mr. Harper. This is Sarah Bowen, Marcus's sister." Thomas's breath caught. He'd forgotten about his promise to Marcus in those final moments. "Tell my sister I tried." "Miss Bowen, I've been meaning to call you. The FBI told me you were with my brother when he died." Her voice was controlled, but Thomas heard the grief beneath it. "I haven't spoken to Marcus in 6 years. We had a falling out after he got involved with, well, with the wrong people. But I need to know." At the end, was he scared? Thomas closed his eyes, seeing Marcus's face in those last moments. The regret, the resignation, the faint hope that maybe, somehow, his death could mean something. "He asked me to tell you he tried," Thomas said. "At the end, he tried to do the right thing." "Did he suffer?" "No," Thomas lied. "It was quick." Sarah was quiet for a long time. "The FBI also told me about Dolores, about the baby, my niece or nephew." She took a shaky breath. "I want to fight for custody. When Dolores's mother passes, I want to raise Marcus's child. That's good. That's really good. But I need character witnesses. People who knew Marcus before he went down this path. The FBI said you served together. Thomas thought about the Marcus he'd known in Afghanistan. The one who'd carried him 2 miles. The one who'd joked about terrible MRE meals and wrote letters to his little sister every week. The one who'd been a good man before the war broke something inside him that never healed. I'll testify, Thomas said. Whatever you need. After they hung up, Thomas sat with Maverick and thought about second chances, about how Marcus had given him one in Kandahar, and how he'd failed to return the favor, about the baby who'd never know their father, but might still have a chance at something better. 6 months later, Thomas stood in family court and told the judge about the Marcus Bowen he'd known. A good soldier, a loyal friend, a man who'd saved Thomas's life without hesitation. He didn't mention the drugs or the FBI or the storm. He talked about who Marcus had been before the war and who he'd tried to be again at the very end. The judge awarded custody to Sarah Bowen, with the stipulation that she maintain therapy for the child and keep the court updated on their welfare. Dolores was sentenced to 18 years. Her mother died 3 months into her incarceration. The baby, a girl named Harper Marie, at Dolores's request, went to live with Sarah in Phoenix. Thomas received a letter from Sarah a year later. Inside was a photograph of Harper Marie, now 18 months old, playing with a German Shepherd puppy. I thought she should grow up with a dog, Sarah wrote. The shelter said this one's mother was a K who'd been retired for medical reasons. Turns out she'd had a litter before retirement. This puppy is gentle but protective, smart as anything. Reminds me of the stories you told about Maverick. We named him Maverick Jr. Hope you don't mind. Thomas pinned the photograph to his refrigerator. Next to it, he placed another photo, the only one he had of Marcus. Taken in Afghanistan, young, smiling, full of possibility. Thomas had started a small business by then, nothing fancy, just dog training for veterans with PTSD. He worked with local shelters to pair retired military and police dogs with former soldiers who needed them. The work didn't pay much, but it was enough. And it meant something. Maverick was always by his side during training sessions, demonstrating commands with the patience of a saint. The dog's limp had faded to almost nothing. Sometimes, on cold mornings, he'd favor his right side. But mostly he was just Maverick, loyal, steady, present. On the first anniversary of that storm, Thomas drove to the coast. He stood on a beach near where it had all happened and scattered wildflowers into the surf. For Marcus, for the man he'd been and the man he'd tried to become. For all the soldiers who came home broken and never found their way to healing, Maverick stood beside him, pressing warm against Thomas's leg. We made it, boy, Thomas said quietly. Against all odds, we made it. The dog's tail wagged, gulls cried overhead, waves rolled in and out, patient and endless. Thomas thought about Jake's words from that terrible night, justice isn't always clean. He'd spent a year trying to reconcile that truth. Marcus had been a criminal, yes, but he'd also been a victim of war, of a broken VA system, of his own worst choices. Could someone be both? Could you mourn a man while acknowledging the harm he'd caused? Thomas still didn't have answers, but he was learning to live with the questions. His phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Harper's first birthday party next month. Would love if you could come. She asks about Maffick. Constantly saw your dog in a video call and fell in love. Thomas smiled. He'd never imagined becoming part of this strange, fractured family. But life had a way of creating connections in unexpected places. He texted back, "We'll be there," Maverick barked once, as if agreeing. They walked back to the car together, leaving the past behind with the flowers and the tide. Not everything broken could be fixed, but some things could be rebuilt. Not into what they were before that was impossible. Into something new, something that honored the scars while refusing to be defined by them. Thomas had been dead once. In that Humvee in Kandahar, Marcus had brought him back. Now Thomas carried that gift forward to Harper Marie, to the veterans he trained, to the dogs he placed in homes where they were needed. It wasn't redemption. Redemption was too clean a word for the messy reality of healing. But it was purpose. And some days, purpose was enough. He drove home as evening fell, Maverick asleep in the passenger seat. The dog's breathing was deep and even, the sound of a creature at peace. Thomas reached over and scratched behind Maverick's ears. "Good boy," he whispered. "Best boy." And for the first time in 15 years, Thomas Harper believed he might be okay. If you've ever felt broken by what life has thrown at you, this story is for you. Thomas Harper thought his best years were behind him, haunted by war, abandoned by systems that promised to care, surviving on fumes and the loyalty of a dog who refused to give up on him. But sometimes our greatest trials become the bridge to our greatest purpose. The truth is, it's never too late to rebuild, not into who you were before the pain, but into someone stronger, someone who understands that scars can become wisdom and loss can become compassion. Thomas found his second life not by forgetting his wounds, but by using them to help others heal. Maverick taught him that loyalty doesn't require perfection, that love shows up even when everything else falls apart, and that the most profound connections often come on 4 legs instead of 2. Every veteran who finds peace through Thomas's program, every child who grows up with the protection he provides, every dog who gets a second chance, these are the ripples of one man's refusal to surrender. Your darkest chapter doesn't have to be your final one. Sometimes survival is just the beginning of your real story. Have you ever been saved by an unexpected friend? What kept you going when everything seemed lost? Share your story below. Someone needs to hear that they're not alone.